The HOA president was on a live Zoom call inside my log cabin, explaining community security, when my automatic door politely announced that 3 unauthorized people were trying to leave. That is not a sentence I ever expected to say in retirement. On the screen behind him, in letters large enough for the property management company to read, was a slide titled HOA Operations, Emergency Property Standards Review. He was standing under it in my cabin, wearing his good navy blazer, talking about responsibility and neighborhood standards, like he had not just converted private property into a conference room without asking the man who owned it. Then the door said, in the calm little voice I had programmed years earlier, "Security mode restored. Unauthorized access logged. 3 occupants detected." The president froze. The treasurer lunged toward the laptop to mute the meeting and somehow muted herself instead, which meant everyone on the call could still hear the door, still see the panic, and still watch the compliance volunteer point her phone at the window like she had discovered evidence instead of become it. Then the old festival color burst system in the ceiling completed its cycle. It was harmless. Washable powder and paper confetti. The kind I had installed years before for 4th of July parties when my nephews were small and easily impressed. No fire, no smoke, no heat, no danger. Just one bright, ridiculous cough of blue and pink over the folding table. The president's blazer turned the color of a county fair snow cone. I was standing outside, boots in the gravel, phone in one hand, access panel open beside me, waiting for the deputy I had already called. I pressed the intercom button and said, "That is the first accurate meeting minute you've produced today." To understand why 3 HOA board members were inside my private log cabin, live on camera, covered in festival powder, asking me to let them out, you have to understand 2 things. First, I built doors for a living. Second, some people see a broken latch and think it is an invitation. My name is Caleb Rusk. I am 58 years old, 6'2" if my back is cooperating, and I have the kind of face that makes people assume I either shoe horses or warn hikers about weather. I wear old boots, denim shirts, and a sun-battered hat that my daughter keeps threatening to bury with honors. Most people in Lake Hollow Estates thought I was some rough old cabin guy who knew how to fix fences and maybe change a tractor tire. They were not entirely wrong. I can do both. But for 31 years before retirement, I designed and installed automatic doors, access control panels, emergency releases, card readers, and security relays. Courthouses, hospitals, grocery stores, warehouses, office buildings. If it slid, latched, beeped, logged, failed open, failed secure, or refused to behave in January, I had probably crawled inside its control box with a flashlight. That kind of work teaches you a simple truth. People lie with confidence. Doors do not. A door does not gossip. It logs. The log cabin was supposed to be my quiet project. Not fancy, not large, just a 2-room cedar and pine place on the back edge of the development where the woods start getting serious. I bought it after my divorce, partly because I liked the porch, partly because I liked the silence, and partly because I wanted one place where nobody could schedule a committee meeting at me. It had a front room, a little kitchen, a sleeping loft, a stone fireplace, and a view of a creek that did not care about bylaws. Because I am me, I overbuilt the entry system. Smart latch, keypad, camera, manual override, emergency release, access log, and a small home control panel that ran lights, thermostat, and a few silly things left over from family parties. One of those silly things was a ceiling color burst rig. My nephews loved it. My sister hated it. I considered both reactions proof of quality engineering. For almost a year, the cabin was peaceful. Then a storm rolled through in early May and knocked half the neighborhood sideways. Nothing dramatic at my place, just a surge that cooked part of the access control board. The keypad went dark, and the powered latch dropped into a bypass state. That was irritating, but not dangerous. The cabin still shut. It just did not behave like my cabin usually behaved. I ordered a replacement controller and put a utility notice in the window so nobody would think the dead keypad was permanent. I covered the furniture because I was sanding the interior wall, taped plastic over a few boards, and stayed away for a couple of weekends while waiting on the part. From the road, I will admit, the place looked inactive. Inactive is not the same as abandoned. My boots are inactive when I sleep. I still own them. The HOA board did not share that philosophy. Lake Hollow Estates had changed over the last year. The old board used to handle things with a clipboard, a phone call, and a reasonable amount of shame. Then Martin Vale became president. Martin liked titles. He liked laminated signs. He liked saying community standards in the tone other people reserve for scripture. His treasurer, Ellen Park, was more nervous than cruel. She had the look of someone who knew a rule was being bent and hoped the bending would stop before anyone asked her to sign the receipt. And then there was Dana Crisp, the volunteer compliance coordinator. That was not an elected position. It was a clipboard with ambition. Their problems started when the community center closed for mold remediation. Not a disaster, just enough of a problem that the board could not use the meeting room for a month. Normal people would have rented the library room on Route 8 for $20 an hour. Martin looked at my dark keypad and covered porch and invented government. I learned later from Ellen's own notes how the conversation went. "Do we know whose place this is?" she had asked. "It's inactive," Martin said. Ellen said, "Inactive isn't the same as available." Dana, never one to leave a bad idea unsupported, said abandoned-looking structures could affect property values. That was all Martin needed. He had a way of pausing after someone else spoke, as if he were giving common sense one last chance to agree with him. According to Ellen's notes, he stood at the end of the table in the library lobby because they were not allowed in the actual library room without a reservation, and tapped his pen against the folder. "We have records that need to be secured," he said. Ellen wrote, "Records currently in Martin's vehicle." That detail told me she still had some survival instinct. "We have hearings scheduled," Martin said. "We have compliance deadlines. We cannot let one unavailable room paralyze association operations." Dana said, "And if the cabin is neglected, using it may actually help preserve it." There are sentences that should be stopped by a responsible adult before they mature. Nobody stopped that one. Ellen asked whether they should at least leave a notice on the door. Martin said, "If the owner cared about the structure, the system would be functioning." That was the moment, right there. Not the first meeting, not the ring light, not the blue powder. That sentence was the little hinge the whole mess swung on. If the owner cared. He did not know me. He did not know the storm had burned the control board. He did not know a replacement controller was already on its way. He did not know that the dead keypad was not a surrender flag. But he liked the conclusion, so he treated the missing facts as paperwork he could file later. Ellen tried one more time. "Temporary means one meeting," she said. Martin said, "Temporary means until continuity is restored." Dana added, "We should document that we are protecting community interests." So they documented it. That was my favorite part later. They wrote down the language that proved they had talked themselves into it. They did not call it trespass. They called it a protective occupancy review. They did not call it using my cabin. They called it continuity support. They did not call me the owner. They called me the inactive property contact. I've been called many things in my life. Inactive property contact was new. He called it temporary administrative use, then protective occupancy, then community continuity. By the time they were done renaming it, Trespassing had put on a tie and become policy. They started with one plastic file box, according to the camera timestamps I recovered later. Then came a folding table. Then coffee supplies. Then a portable speakerphone. Then a ring light, because apparently unauthorized occupancy looks better with flattering skin tone. Finally, they mounted a little screen against my sanded wall and labeled the space HOA Operations. Nobody said, "Let's break into Caleb's cabin." That would have sounded bad. They said, "Until a proper venue is restored." That sounded like something you could put in minutes. For the first couple of weeks, I only noticed small things. The thermostat was set to 72 when I keep it at 61 unless I'm there. The electric bill had a bump. Not a mountain, but enough to annoy a retired man with a spreadsheet. There were tire tracks in the damp gravel after a rain. One Saturday, I found a faint circular mark on the table, the kind a ring light leaves when someone clamps it down too tight. I stood there for a while, looking at that circle. There are many innocent explanations for a ring light in a private log cabin. I could not think of one, but I am told there are many. Then I found the speakerphone cable under the table. After that, I stopped being irritated and started being careful. I put up a temporary trail camera where it could see the front approach. I saved utility bills. I took pictures of the thermostat and the table mark. I checked the CC and Rs and my deed, because I have learned that people who use official language are often hoping nobody reads the official paper. There was nothing in the HOA documents giving them a right to occupy private dwellings, private cabins, storage rooms, porches, sheds, dog houses, tree forts, or anything else owned by somebody else. That was not surprising. Still, I printed the relevant pages and put them in a folder, because a folder calms people down in ways a sentence cannot. The camera filled in the rest. The first clip was just Martin carrying a box from his SUV. He looked both ways before opening my door, which told me he knew enough to feel watched and not enough to stop. The second clip showed Dana with the ring light under one arm and the speakerphone in the other. The third showed Ellen standing on the porch for almost a full minute before going in. That one bothered me. Ellen knew. Not everything, maybe. Not the legal pieces, not the control board details. But she knew the shape of wrong well enough to hesitate at the threshold. Then she stepped over it anyway, because people like Martin make doubt feel disloyal. I started a log of my own. Date, time, vehicle, what I could see, what changed afterward. May 14th, 2 vehicles, thermostat changed. May 17th, 3 vehicles, coffee smell, table moved 6 inches. May 21st, agenda scrap in trash. May 24th, ring light mark, screen tape residue. May 27th, speakerphone cable left behind. It was not dramatic work. Good documentation rarely is. It is mostly writing down boring things before they become important. I also called the power company and confirmed the usage spike. Nothing huge, but enough to show the cabin had been occupied while I was not there. I saved the bill next to the camera stills. If I had learned one thing from 30 years of access systems, it was that one log can be dismissed. 3 logs start arguing with each other in your favor. By the time I drove up with the replacement controller, I already knew someone had been using the cabin. What I did not know was how comfortable they had gotten. The day I first caught them was not planned. The replacement controller had shipped early, and I drove out to the cabin on a Tuesday afternoon to check the panel before installing it. I parked under the pines, walked around the bend, and saw 3 cars in my gravel turnout. One of them had a magnetic sign on the door. Lake Hollow Estates, HOA. Subtle as a marching band. I walked up to my own cabin and heard voices inside. Not burglars whispering. Board members discussing agenda items like the room belonged to them. The front door opened when I tried it.
That bothered me more than if it had been forced. A forced door admits a crime happened. A door used casually means someone has already explained the crime to themselves. Martin was standing near my wall screen with a remote in his hand. Ellen had a binder open.
Dana was recording something on her phone, probably the walls, possibly her own importance. All three turned when I stepped in. Martin recovered first. People like Martin usually do. "Mr. Rusk," he said, "this is a temporary board matter." I looked at the folding table, the coffee mugs, the ring light, the screen on my wall, the little handwritten label on the speakerphone that said, "Board use." "In my cabin," I said. "We believed the structure was inactive." "My boots are inactive when I sleep," I said. "I still own them." Ellen looked down at the binder. Dana raised her phone. "You altered the entry system without architectural approval." That one made me smile, which was probably unkind. "It is my entry system," I said. Martin held up both hands like a man calming a crowd that did not exist. "Let's not escalate this. We had no malicious intent. We were maintaining continuity while the community center is unavailable." "Show me the permission." He blinked. "The what?" "The written permission that lets you use my cabin." Ellen's eyes moved toward Martin. Dana's phone dipped half an inch. Martin said, "There was an understanding." "With who?" That question sat in the room for a while. It was the best part of the meeting, in my opinion. I did not yell. I did not touch anyone. I told them to pack up what they had brought and leave. Then I wrote a demand letter that evening, plain as a fence post. No more entry, no storage, no meetings, no use of utilities. Any return would be documented as unauthorized trespass, and all prior use would be itemized. I sent it by email and certified mail. Martin replied 12 minutes later. That is never a good sign. Nobody reads a demand letter carefully in 12 minutes. They react to it. His email said the board disputed my characterization, that no damage had been done, that the association had acted in good faith during a facilities disruption, and that my tone was not conducive to neighborly resolution. I read that line twice. Neighborly resolution, apparently, begins after you hold meetings in a man's cabin. I wrote back with one sentence. "Do not enter the property again without written permission." Then I printed both emails and put them in the folder. That was the part Martin never understood. He thought a stern reply was a defense. To me, it was a timestamp with a personality problem. That should have ended it. It did not. Because Martin Vale had spent too much time hearing himself say community standards. 3 days later, my temporary camera sent me a motion alert. There they were again. Same 3 cars, same folding table, same ring light. This time, Martin had dressed for a video call. That was when I decided the door could have its say. Before I touched the controller, I called the county sheriff's non-emergency number. I gave my name, the property address, and the situation in the least colorful way possible. Unauthorized occupants in a private log cabin, prior written demand, camera view, access system disabled from prior storm damage, replacement controller on site. I could restore the system from the exterior service panel and wanted a deputy present or en route before I confronted anyone. The dispatcher asked the questions she should have asked. "Is anyone in medical distress?" "No, ma'am." "Any fire, weapon, child, animal, or immediate danger?" "No." "If the door resecures, can you release it?" "Immediately. Manual release, exterior control, and visual on the room. Do not go inside. Do not argue through the door if they become aggressive. Preserve the video. If anyone claims emergency distress, release the door." "Understood," I said. "The door can hold a record better than my temper can." She did not laugh, but I heard the pen pause. I opened the service panel and installed the controller. I did not arm the system yet. Through the camera, I watched Martin start his Zoom call. The property management company was on screen. 2 committee volunteers joined. Martin stood in front of the agenda screen, shoulders squared, saying Lake Hollow needed a stronger culture of accountability. It was a beautiful sentence, considering the room. Before I pressed the final command, I checked the safety list out loud, partly for the dispatcher and partly for myself. Front door visible, side windows visible, no smoke, no medical distress, no minors, no pets, manual release working, exterior release working, camera recording, audio recording. The dispatcher said, "Deputy is 6 to 8 minutes out." Copy. I looked through the glass. Martin was using his hands now, the way people do when they believe a call is going well. Ellen had the ledger open. Dana was angling her phone to make the room look bigger than it was. Behind them, my old wall reflected ring light glare in a perfect white circle. For half a second, I thought about walking away and letting the deputy handle everything. Then Martin said into the Zoom call, "What this community lacks is consistent enforcement." That helped me decide. I restored security mode. The latch engaged with a clean click I felt in my knees. The cabin speaker chimed. Security mode restored. Manual bypass event recorded. Unauthorized access logged. 3 occupants detected. Inside, Martin turned toward the door slowly. Ellen reached for the laptop. Dana raised her phone. On the Zoom screen, a woman from the management company leaned closer. Martin said, "One moment, we're having a minor technical issue." The door said, "Exit request denied. Owner confirmation required." Ellen whispered something I could not hear. Dana said loudly, "I'm documenting hostile interference by the homeowner." The system said, "Occupant 3 identified near east window." I had forgotten how much I liked that voice. Martin came to the door and looked through the glass panel. "Caleb, open this door." I pressed the intercom. "Show me the permission." "This is ridiculous. We are conducting official business." "That is not permission." Ellen, still trying to mute the Zoom, clicked the wrong icon and muted herself. The rest of them stayed audible. The property manager's face on the screen had gone very still. Then the home panel finished its old party sequence. Festival mode completed. The ceiling nozzles gave one soft thump. Blue powder drifted over Martin's shoulders. Pink dust landed on Dana's clipboard. A little gold confetti settled into Ellen's open binder, like the cabin was congratulating her on poor judgment. There was a moment of perfect silence. Then Martin, blue from the left shoulder to the pocket square, said, "Turn that thing off." I said, "That's funny. It said the same thing about you." On the Zoom call, one of the committee volunteers covered her mouth. Not well. Ellen finally found the mute button, but by then the damage had already put on shoes and left the house. To be clear, nobody was trapped in danger. They were 10 feet from a door I could release. I had camera view, audio, and the sheriff on the way. If anyone had said chest pain, smoke, injury, panic attack, anything real, I would have opened it immediately. But embarrassment is not an emergency. Martin tried the handle again. The system logged it. Dana tried the side window. The system logged her motion. Ellen said, "Martin, the call is still showing video." That, more than the trespass, seemed to frighten him. The deputy arrived 6 minutes later, delayed slightly because Martin had parked his SUV across my turn-in with the hazards on. That felt appropriate. Some men block access even when trying to deny they were ever there. I met the deputy in the driveway with my hands visible and the folder ready. His name was Deputy Harris, and he had the tired patience of a man who had heard every possible version of technically. "You the owner?" "Yes, sir." "Anyone hurt?" "No." "Can you open it?" "Right now." I showed him the call log, the camera feed, the written demand, and the manual release. He nodded once and told me to open the door. I did. Martin came out first, still blue, already talking. "Deputy, This man intentionally locked us in during an official HOA meeting. Deputy Harris looked at him, then at me, then at the cabin. Who owns the property? I do, I said. He turned back to Martin. Do you have written permission to be inside? Martin wiped blue powder from his lapel. We understood the property was abandoned. It was waiting on a control board, I said. There is a difference between quiet and orphaned. Ellen stepped out behind him. She had gold confetti in her hair and the expression of someone calculating reimbursement in real time. We only used it for official business, she said. Deputy Harris said, that is not an answer to permission. Dana held up her phone. He trapped us, I said. I called before I touched the controller. The system logs will show the sequence. Deputy Harris asked Martin one more time for written authorization.
Martin talked about community continuity, the closed community center, inactive property, abandoned appearance, administrative necessity, and the responsibility of the board to maintain standards. He used many words. None of them were yes. The deputy did not arrest anyone that afternoon. I know some people would have wanted handcuffs, and I understand the feeling. But real life is often less theatrical than a comment section. What he did do was take an incident report, instruct them to remove every HOA item from my cabin under his supervision, and warn them not to return without written permission from me.
Watching Martin carry a folding table out of my cabin while covered in blue powder was not justice in the grand legal sense. But it was tidy. It also took longer than he wanted. Every item had to be identified because Deputy Harris was not about to let 3 embarrassed board members claim later that I had kept association property. The folding table, the speakerphone, the ring light, the wall screen, 2 boxes of files, 3 mugs, a plastic bin of coffee pods, a roll of blue painter's tape, a little brass nameplate that said "Board Session" in black letters. I held that one up. You brought a nameplate? Martin said nothing. Deputy Harris looked at it and said, for temporary use. That deputy had timing. Ellen made an inventory list with gold confetti still in her hair. Dana tried to keep filming until the deputy told her she was free to record from public or common areas, but not while standing in my doorway after being told to leave. She moved back 3 steps and looked personally betrayed by property rights. When the last box was out, I closed the door and watched the latch seat. Clean click. Best sound in the world. The real problem for the HOA did not fit in the back of Martin's SUV. It was in their records. Once I had the cabin back, I looked through what they had left behind and what the camera had captured. I did not open private member files that were not mine. I did not need to. The agenda screen, sign-in sheets, meeting minutes, and fine approval notes were enough. They had discussed enforcement matters in my private log cabin. They had approved violation letters. They had reviewed fines. They had held what they called official sessions in a location that was not properly noticed, not accessible to members, and not owned or leased by the association. The door log turned out to be the cleanest board record they had. I sent the HOA an invoice for electricity, cleaning, access system wear, coffee supplies, and unauthorized use of the cabin. I attached the incident report number, copies of my written demand, still frames from the camera, and the access logs showing entries after notice. Then I sent a shorter packet to a few neighbors who had already been asking why the board had gotten so strange. I did not editorialize. I did not need to. A photograph of a blue HOA president standing under an HOA operations screen does a lot of its own public relations. By sunset, 3 neighbors had texted me. By the next morning, 7. By Thursday, someone had printed a still from the Zoom call and taped it to the bulletin board by the mailboxes with a handwritten caption that said, "Is this the new community center?" I did not put it there. I did not remove it either. The next member meeting was held at the library, which was poetic because the library had been available the whole time for $20 an hour and came with a door nobody had to justify. I attended in clean boots and the same old hat. Martin tried to open with a statement about misunderstanding and operational necessity. He did not get far. A woman named Carla, who had been fined for a trash bin being visible 12 minutes too long, raised her hand and asked, "Was my fine approved in that cabin?" Martin said the board had conducted routine administrative review. Carla said, "Was I allowed to attend?" Ellen looked at her notes. Nobody answered. Then Mr. Alvarez from Cedar Bend stood up. He is 82, walks with a cane, and has the kind of soft voice that makes a room lean in before it knows why. "My wife and I got a notice about our porch rail," he said. "The notice said it had been reviewed by the board on May 24th.
Was that one of the cabin meetings? Ellen turned a page.
Martin said, "We are not going to litigate every individual matter in this forum." Mr. Alvarez nodded politely. "I am not litigating. I am asking whether the meeting happened in a place members could attend." That was when the room changed. Before that, people were amused and annoyed. After that, they understood the door was not the scandal. The door was the witness. The scandal was a board making decisions in a private room, then sending fines to people who had no realistic way to know where those decisions were made. Another homeowner asked for the minutes. Someone else asked for the sign-in sheets. A third asked whether the management company had been informed the Zoom location was private property. The property manager, sitting in the back row, developed a sudden interest in her laptop. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Another neighbor asked whether meeting notices had listed my cabin as a location. Another asked whether HOA insurance covered officers occupying private property. Someone else asked whether the association had reimbursed me or whether members were about to pay for the board's continuity. That word did not sound as clean in a room full of homeowners. I stood only once. "I am not asking you to like me," I said. "I am asking you to understand the difference between a broken latch and permission. Your board used my log cabin after written notice not to. They conducted official business where members could not attend. They used association authority to excuse private trespass. If that is how rules work here, then none of us own anything quietly." That was the longest speech I gave. It was enough. By the end of the week, the HOA announced that all enforcement decisions made during the cabin meetings would be paused and reviewed. The association reimbursed me for the invoice after some very uncomfortable math from Ellen. The compliance volunteer position was eliminated, which was a polite way of saying Dana's clipboard had been retired for cause. Ellen stepped down as treasurer 2 days later. Her resignation said personal reasons. I believed her. Publicly explaining why your board owed money for unauthorized cabin use is personal. Martin lasted until the following Monday. The official notice said he resigned to avoid becoming a distraction from community healing. That is one of those phrases people use when the truth is wearing blue powder in a screenshot. The actual reasons were simpler. Trespass report, unauthorized meeting location, questionable fine approvals, abuse of authority, and the kind of public embarrassment that makes even loyal supporters stop returning calls. The new board adopted a written meeting location policy. Public notice, accessible location, records retained. No private property use without written permission, and a lease approved by members. In other words, rules. The thing they had claimed to love. They also created a reimbursement line item in the next financial report, which is a fancy way of saying everybody got to see exactly how expensive temporary administrative use had become. Electricity, cleaning, replacement fasteners for the wall, access system inspection, cabin use fee, certified mail, Even the carpet runner I had to replace because blue powder may be washable, but wet boots are forever. Some people thought I should have charged more. I told them I was not trying to get rich. I was trying to make the lesson itemized. I repaired the cabin properly the next weekend. New controller, tested release, fresh battery backup, camera sign, and a clean front room. I wiped the last pink dust from the edge of the table and found one piece of gold confetti wedged between the floorboards. I left it there. Some evidence deserves preservation. These days, the HOA meets at the library. $20 an hour, fluorescent lights, stackable chairs, a regular door that opens for everybody. Somehow, this has been treated like a breakthrough in community governance. As for my log cabin, it is quiet again. The latch closes like it means it. The access panel does what I built it to do. The porch faces the creek. My boots sit by the door when I am inside, inactive and still very much mine. I never had to yell. The door did the talking. The logs did the remembering. And the HOA, as far as I can tell, did the rest to themselves.